welcome to Diligent Canine. This is part 3 of teaching your dog an attention heel, otherwise known as a focus heel or competition heel. Just to recap quick before we get started, part 1 talked about teaching your dog to find the left leg. Part 2 talked about teaching your dog to follow the left leg when it moves, when you move. And both of those videos talked about using a wall to aid in both of those processes, as well as luring and fading lures, how to manipulate a dog through space by luring with food. And in this video here, I'm going to talk about turns. Now, I'm showing all of these different components to a heeling pattern, which you see in competitions, so that you can practice these skills individually. And of course, when it comes time to develop a pattern, or if the sport that you're competing in has a prescribed pattern, you can of course follow and implement that, because if you train these skills individually as components, you can of course string them together in any order that you want. So in this video, I'm going to talk about turns and the foundations of turning, teaching your dog to turn while in a heeling position. I've done videos in the past about teaching a place command as well as a touch command. That's actually in the same video, but having a touch command is going to be the foundation of turning in a heel. And the reason being, we're going to use the podium. In this case, I've just got a toque here. You can use anything you want that'll work, that the dog knows to put its front paws on. And so how we're going to start teaching really crisp turns is reminding the dog that they have a butt. So we're going to teach them rear end awareness in this video, and I'll show some different objects you can use to teach the dog. As with the touch command, as I explained in that video, starting with something wide like this is going to be really easy for the dog to get their paws on, and that is a good place to start. And as the dog gets more advanced, you can obviously make that target that they have to stand on smaller and smaller. A lot of people use an overturned water bowl, and then or move to a overturned 5 or 2 gallon bucket, just a plastic paint bucket. I posted videos before on Instagram where I've used like posts in a parking lot or on the street, things like that. So you have a whole lot of options, but let's take a look at how this rear end awareness development works. As I mentioned, the first thing I need my dog to do is to touch the object. Touch. Easy enough. Mark and reward. Yes. Now, if I've taught my dog what command means, come to my left leg, this is going to be pretty easy. So you see he's already moving closer to me. He already got off, so I'll put him back on. Touch. Okay, and then give him fuss. His heel command. You can see his butt came over to me. Now, the reason this works is because, especially when you have a smaller object, smaller in diameter, the dog has to keep his paws static in front while his butt turns towards me. Okay, and this is how we simulate those turns. Fuss. His butt turns over to me. We'll go again. Ding. Nice. Touch. Fuss. Again. Fuss. Okay, and then I can add duration to this, just like all the other things. Fuss. And obviously, if he was on a bucket, we'd be moving in a nice circle. This is working pretty well. Yes. I can fade my lures here as well. No food in hand. Hand up here. Fuss. Okay. Same thing. Walk around the object. Yes. And a bit of the reward. Okay. And we need to work the other direction as well. Fuss. So that the dog won't creep too wide when we do right-handed turns as well. So this is rear end awareness development. Touch. Fuss. Yes. Fuss. Yes. Whoa, touch. Puss. Yes. Puss. Yes. Once your dog has a really good understanding of rear end awareness and how to move on those targets, various textures. You can see I used some slippery ones to really make sure my dog would stay focused on me while he's moving. All good signs. Obviously, you don't have to start there right away. I think when I first taught my dog, I used a stack of books on the ground. So that's obviously something you can do, and you can experiment with different objects, chairs, water jugs, paint cans, anything you want. And they can be of various stability as well, like I said, either with a slippery top or a smaller diameter where they might topple over if the dog doesn't stay balanced. All of that is stuff that you can work into your training. So the next part in teaching turns when heeling is paying attention to your footwork. Obviously we have left and right turns. Once we're walking forward and backwards or sidestepping, we need to work in left turns and right turns. Typically in the dog sports that I've looked at the rule books for, you have about turns which are 180 degrees, and you have regular turns which are 90 degrees. So obviously when you train this and you play with this, you can go 90 degrees this way, 180 degrees this way, maybe a whole 360 degrees this way, 90 degrees back this way, 180 degrees back this way. Mix in lots of variability so that your dog doesn't get too accustomed to either turning only 90 degrees or only 180 degrees. You've got a lot of variety in there, and the dog really learns to follow your left leg. So obviously we talked about that a lot in the second video, but that's really the principle here. Is you're teaching the dog to follow your left leg, not only when you move forwards, backwards, and side to side, but also when your body rotates, the dog needs to stay on your left leg. When it comes to how I move through space, I found that to be really important when teaching my dog how I want the dog to follow me. So for this, my footwork when I'm walking is not nearly as simple as walking, and then I make a right turn and keep walking, and then I make a left turn where I pivot kind of on my the ball of my foot, my heel turns, and my body turns. Obviously, we're walking here when we're heeling, but that's not always the most helpful in teaching your dog. So what I've found to be helpful for me when teaching my dog to turn in a heel is I do kind of a marching step where I, particularly with the left leg, I'll kind of like swing my leg forward and then swing it around. So it's a very like almost mechanical leg work where I walk, and swing for my left turns. And I found this to be helpful with my right turns as well. So I walk, and then my left hip pivots. Okay, but it kind of stays in place for the dog to stay focused on. So getting into the actual turns then, as always, we can use lures to start the behavior, to teach the behavior, and then fade those lures off. Watch my other videos if you don't know what that means. So, call the dog to me. And with the left turn, I used to teach this, all right, I first taught this to my dog kind of like the in front of the body switch. So we'd be walking and I would lure him to come around like so. Oh, he doesn't even do that anymore. Try again. Yes. Okay. I'll let you see it from the other side. I'm luring with this hand, and I lure the dog in front of me while I turn around and replace the lure with this hand. Okay, one more time. Yes. Okay. Now that I mentioned that's how I first taught it, but I found that that's really not. That's really just teaching the dog to do 2 or 3 right turns in a row to add up to a left turn. Just to explain that a little bit, if I want to turn left, but I don't know how to turn left, if I turn right once, twice, 3 times, I end up still going the desired direction. So I found that to be kind of confusing for the dog, so that's why I moved to the marching step that I referenced. So let's take a look at that in motion with lures. First. So I'm walking, swing, step, yes. It's a good clean turn, and I can move the dog, but you guys see that from the back. Walking and swing, yes. Do it in, swing, and swing, yes. Okay, and this works well for the right turns as well. And big swing, 180 degrees. Big swing the other way. Yes. Once you have established a good routine of teaching your dog to walk and follow you and turn, there are a couple things, a couple finer points to pay attention to get a really crisp and clean heel. And those apply differently to the left and right turns respectively. So when I make a left turn, it's not uncommon, but it's a problem, that your dog will bump into the leg. So if I'm, imagine trying to walk in a figure 8 pattern, like so, then when I go to make that figure 8, my dog is still trying to walk forward and I bump into him. And he's still trying to walk forward and I'm trying to turn and I bump into him, okay? So that's why our turns need to be really crisp. And it's also why heeling in a figure 8 pattern, like in PSA, is a really cool activity to challenge some of the more mechanical turns, that being only intervals of 90 degrees, 180 degrees, etc. So the mechanics still apply the same way. Like I said, that sort of marching swing step is helpful. It is helpful for those 90 or 180 or even 360 degree turns. They just happen on a smaller scale when you're working your way around a circle. So I'll show you without the dog and I'll show you with the dog. So when I'm trying to walk in a counterclockwise circle, so all left turns, when I walk, I'm able to approximate that and my hips can swivel just fine and I can walk in a circle. But when I'm trying to get my dog, who has a much longer body than I do thickness in my hips, it's harder for them to turn that way. So I can still make those swinging steps. They just happen a lot smaller. Obviously I can't walk and swing like I've got a broken leg or something, but I can make those adjustments very apparent to my dog and he can still follow my left leg. So I'm turning a little bit each time I step with my left leg. And if I've taught my dog properly, he knows that he needs to adjust. I'm trying to exaggerate my arm to show you. He knows that he needs to adjust and follow my left leg as I walk around a circle. So let's look at that with the dog. First. Okay, so in my starting position here, and trying to walk in a circle without bumping into my dog. Okay. Obviously, with a tighter circle, and this is pretty narrow, only a couple feet in diameter, is pretty difficult to not bump into the dog. I can feel my leg rub against him, but he's not impeding my movement, or I'm not colliding with him. Puss. Okay. So he is definitely rubbing up against me, but I'm not like tripping over him, right? Puss. See if I can make this a little bigger circle. Yes. Okay, and I'll try that without food. Okay, so I'm walking in a circle here. And you can see he's a little out in front of me, but that's kind of just how he walks. I haven't been able to determine if that is how I've taught him, if that's a training mistake. Yes. Or if he just walks in front of me. Different sports have different requirements, as far as whether you're going to get dinged for points if the dog is a little out in front of you, but they stay consistent in that. In other words, the dog isn't trying to like dart out or race in front of you. That's kind of just where they walk. I think the PSA rule book is a little more lenient on that versus something like Schutzhund or IPO, where the dog must remain like shoulder behind your hip or something like that. I'm not exactly sure on the rules there, but read your rule book for whatever sport you're competing in. So that is left leg problems, with you usually bumping into your dog as you're trying to turn left, since the dog is heeling, means walking at the left side. The problem with right turns is that the dog's butt tends to come way wide. So if my dog is walking beside me, when I turn right, the dog tends to flare his butt way out and kind of like creeps around in front of me. So if I finish my right hand turn, the dog continues to move around in front of me, breaking that left side alignment. So a really handy trick that I learned, I think it was in a Forced Mickey video from a long time ago with Learberg, that you can teach the dog to do something right after you make that right turn. Something like having the dog turn in a circle. If you've taught them a turn and a rotate, or to turn in a circle command, you can, what that looks like is this. Yes. Without a command. So going to the right for him means rotate. Yes. Oh, sorry, I confused my own dog, but he followed the lure. That's actually left, and I use turn for that. Turn. Okay. Just a quick recap. When the dog's in front of me, that looks like this. Come. Ding, come. Good. Turn. Yes. Okay. So I can add a turn at the end of my right, add a turn command for the dog to spin in a circle after my right hand turn, like so. Swing my leg and turn the dog. Now, if you pay attention to the dog's mechanics, when he turns, when he turns to spin in a circle this way, his butt has to come close to my butt. Okay, and that's the opposite of his hips flaring wide around the right turn. So we'll go again. Yes. Again. Puss. Okay. And we do that and keep going. And he stays nice and close on the right turns. Puss. Yes. Something else that's really useful, it was in a Forced Mickey video also, though I don't remember if it was the same one. If you run into problems with your dog creeping out in front of you or creeping behind you, or maybe their butt is going wide or the head is going wide, you can walk in less predictable patterns. So rather than just forwards, backwards, a side step left and right, you can walk diagonally. Of course, forwards and backwards, but rather than just forwards, backwards, side step left, side step right, you can walk with your hips still facing forward, but at a diagonal angle, like so, and coming back that direction, and working those diagonals as well. And of course, you're going to bump into your dog a little bit, like on those figure eight patterns, but irregular movements like that really drive home the principle to your dog. So the principle for your dog is to follow your left leg. It's not to move left or move right. It's to follow your left leg no matter where you go. So let's take a little bit of a look at that. Puss. Walking kind of diagonally and not really bumping into him yet. He's doing a good job. Side step, go the other direction, back the other direction. Very good, yes. And of course, we have our regular forwards, backwards, side step left, side step right, and move this way, turning, go that way, got a little wide, yes. So that'll do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please take a minute to subscribe for $1 a month on patreon.com/diligentcanine. A large portion of the money goes to support military working dogs and our veterans. So don't forget them. It's a great honor to have the canines and the service members protecting us overseas and around the world. So remember to show them support while you are learning to train your dog here. Enjoy. Stay tuned. Until next time. Peace out.